Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joe Keon, and I'd like to welcome you all here to the Herbst Theater and an evening with Dr. Helen Caldicott.
As your wonderful President Jefferson said once, prophetically, an informed democracy will behave in a responsible fashion. This democracy recently has been ill-informed. It is run and informed by corporate media who are interested in profits no matter what, and we've seen that recently on Wall Street with Enron and the like. It is true, I think, that the media should not be privately owned. It should be like the BBC or the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, publicly owned, with an individual charter that it can do what it needs to do journalistically to educate the people, because the media is determining the fate of the earth. Today in the New York Times, which was an excellent edition, and I read the New York Times cover to cover every day. Sometimes it's bereft of information, sometimes it's biased, but often it's very good. And the book I've just written, The New Nuclear Danger, George Bush's Military-Industrial Complex, which you can get outside later, many of the references come from the Times. This should be imperative reading for every citizen in the United States. There's an article on page 20, and it's titled On the Job and at Home, Influential Hawks, 30-Year Friendship Evolves, and these are the people that are running this country. These are the people determining foreign policy. The first one is Dick Cheney, who gives the major speeches, and he gave a long speech the other day about why it is necessary to go into Iraq, and I'll discuss that in a minute. He's 62. He's had several major heart attacks. He started off working for Richard Nixon in 1969. He's been a member of the American Enterprise Institute, which is a right-wing think tank like the Heritage Foundation, the chairman and CEO of Halliburton Company, which is currently being investigated for fraud, as is Cheney. He malappropriated or misappropriated $100 million, and I think maybe one of the reasons he's so hasty in going to Iraq is that it will take attention off him. The next one is Donald Rumsfeld, who's 70, who is a friend way back of Dick Cheney. They worked together. He was called by Henry Kissinger the most ruthless man he ever knew. Rumsfeld doesn't believe in any arms control treaties at all. Incidentally, he's one of the architects of the five-layered Star Wars system, missile defense system. Now, who works with Rumsfeld and who really organizes Rumsfeld is a man called Paul Wolfowitz, who's 58. The day after September 11th last year, September the 12th, when there was a single plane in US airspace riding around picking up 20 members of the Bin Laden family to take them back to Saudi Arabia, he was talking about going to Iraq on September the 12th. And they all work together very comfortably. They socialise a little, they go to each other's weddings or whatever, but they are running the whole show. One of the most important conferences, I think, that was held in this country was held in the Herbst Lecture Theatre here, where the United Nations Treaty was signed. Physicians for Social Responsibility held a symposium here on the medical consequences of nuclear war, and we had George Kistiakowsky, who was a chemist in the Manhattan Project. We had Howard Hyatt, who was the Dean of the Harvard School of Public Health. And the thing went on for 2 days, talking about how you make a nuclear weapon, how they explode, what happens if a bomb drops on the Herbst Lecture Theatre. From that symposium was made a film called The Last Epidemic, which was shown literally hundreds of thousands of times throughout the United States, and turned people upside down on the concept of nuclear war. Now, because of the work we all did and throughout the world, and Gorbachev, the Berlin Wall came down and communism collapsed. It was nothing to do with Russia being outspent, as the Hawks would say. It was because Gorbachev heard doctors talk on National Soviet TV about the medical effects of nuclear war. His mother was a Christian, incidentally, and he was so extremely, profoundly affected by that. And how do I know? I attended a women's conference in Moscow. There were 5,000 women from all over the world, women with African butterfly headdresses, women from Peru in their top hats. Gorbachev was the only man in the room. And you've seen this often, it's in the Kremlin, the sort of presidium, big, red, huge hall, and up on the platform was Gorbachev and Raisa, and an Australian woman who helped organise it, and Petra Kelly, who died in Germany, who was sort of my sister, who helped to found the Greens. And they were all up on the podium, and at a certain point in the proceedings, and we were talking about nuclear war, two children, a Russian and an American, came down the aisle with this incredible Russian folk music, all the way down the aisle, and up on the platform, and handed Gorbachev a crystal globe of the world. And he took it from the children, and I watched him. He turned away, got his handkerchief out and wiped his eyes. He was weeping. And the seat of his soul was the fact that he knew we could destroy life on the planet. So the Berlin Wall came down, communism collapsed. But what happened then? Well, George Bush the first got in, and he actually unilaterally removed a lot of nuclear weapons. He said he needed to help Gorbachev combat his combative military. Then Clinton was elected. After the Cold War ended, he set up a nuclear posture review, and he said to Les Aspin, Senator Aspin, you chair it. And Aspin said, and I recount this in this book, from a wonderful book called, by Jan Nolan, The Elusive Consensus. And Aspin said, we don't need nuclear weapons anymore. Russia's friendly, let's get rid of them, let's abolish them, which is what we all thought they were going to do. Well, Aspin then died, very inconveniently. And a young man called Ashton Carter, an altruistic, wonderful young man, blonde hair, took over, and the Joint Chiefs ate him for breakfast, lunch and dinner. And at the end they said they called ash to the carpet and destroyed him, and the nuclear posture review. So at the end of it, the missiles and the weapons were still in place, even though Russia and America are best friends. America still had and has a policy to fight and win a nuclear war against Russia. At the end of the nuclear posture review, the weapons were all still in place, and of course Russia kept hers because that's the only reason she has any power, because she's got nuclear weapons. And one general said, at the end of this, he said, if you threaten our missiles and our early warning system, he said, baby, you're threatening the family jewels. Now I want you to think about that concept and that statement from a psychological perspective. It's very, very profound, and it comes from the reptilian midbrain. So I go into at length the thinking of the military, and like in football, much of the language is sexual. And they talk this language, like missile erectors and soft laydowns and deep penetrations, without any embarrassment in front of women like me and Randy Forsberg, you know, and they haven't even a consciousness to understand that their reptilian midbrain is active. Their right brain isn't working at all, and their left brain is being used to justify what the reptilian midbrain tells them to do. Rumsfeld has what the press call a bizarre style of English language dubbed rummy speak. And there were media people gathered at Brussels recently, the news conference addressed by Rummy, and he said this: the message is that there are no knowns. There are things that we know that we know. There are known unknowns. That is to say, there are things we now know we don't know. But there are also unknown unknowns, things we do not know we don't know. So when we do the best we can and we pull all this information together and we then say, well, that's basically what we see as a situation, that is really only the known knowns and the known unknowns. And each year, we discover a few more of those unknown unknowns. Rumsfeld, seeing the apparent bewilderment on the faces of the scribes, offered a summary of what he said. There's another way to phrase that, and that is that in the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. That the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. That's the man determining much of the foreign policy of the United States of America. Now in this book I talk about who runs this administration. 32 members of the administration, high levels in the cabinet, come from the military-industrial complex. Lockheed Martin occupies 28 seats. The rest come from the Heritage Foundation, which is a right-wing think tank, which spends $29 million a year on the media. So every time you turn on Jim Lehrer, who's very respectful to them, there's the Heritage Foundation fellow talking very smooth, very articulate and intelligent, but their basic concepts, shall I say, are wicked. There are 140 major contaminated areas like Hanford, Washington, Oak Ridge, Tennessee, Savannah River, With this material just leaching into the underground water and spreading in the aquifers, the Columbia River has been the most radioactive river in the world, because Hanford is built right there. I think there are 114 huge